My nephew fired me after 35 years, so I destroyed his $14 million company with one phone call. I walked into the office that morning and knew something was wrong before I even saw what they had done. The smell hit me first. For 35 years, that place smelled like burnt coffee from the ancient Mr. Coffee machine my brother Jack refused to replace, mixed with the chemical tang of blueprint toner and sawdust that somehow always found its way inside despite being 3 blocks from the nearest job site. It smelled like work, like history, like 2 brothers who started with nothing but a pickup truck and a contractor's license, building something real in a world that increasingly valued appearance over substance. Now it smelled like a spa. Lavender. Expensive lavender from one of those pretentious diffusers that cost more than my first month's rent back in 1989. The kind of scent that belongs in a yoga studio, not a construction company office that had survived 3 recessions, 2 housing market crashes, and more ocean inspections than I could count. The walls were wrong, too. Jack and I had kept them that warm cream color, covered with framed photos of our projects. The Riverside Medical Center, the downtown courthouse renovation, the Peterson High School gymnasium that we finished 2 weeks early and under budget, which still stands as one of my proudest moments. Every photo represented thousands of hours of work, problem solving, and the kind of attention to detail that separates a building that lasts from one that becomes a lawsuit waiting to happen. All gone. The walls were now what the design magazines probably call minimalist white. Sterile, like a hospital corridor or an Apple store. Empty except for a few pieces of abstract art that looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas after a particularly bad divorce. I am 58 years old. I have calluses on my hands that have calluses. I have been on job sites in 100-degree heat and 15-degree cold. I have pulled all-nighters fixing structural problems that could have collapsed buildings and killed people. I do not get emotional easily, but standing there, seeing what they had done to the place Jack and I built from nothing, I felt something cold and hard settle into my chest. My brother Jack died 14 months ago. Heart attack at 61, right there at his desk, reviewing plans for a shopping center expansion. The paramedics said he was gone before he hit the floor. I hope that is true. I hope he did not suffer. I hope his last thoughts were about blueprints and load-bearing calculations and all the things that made him happy, not about the chest pain that was killing him. Jack was the people person, the one who could convince a nervous client that, yes, we could absolutely deliver their project on time and on budget, and then we would actually do it. He had this gift for making everyone feel like they were part of something important, from the millionaire developer to the new guy mixing concrete. On his first day, I was the technical brain, the one who made sure everything met code, exceeded standards, and would not fall apart in 20 years. I hold the RMO license, Responsible Managing Officer. It is a license that allows a construction company to legally operate on public works projects, the big contracts that actually pay the bills. Getting one requires years of experience, passing brutal exams, and maintaining a spotless professional record. Jack used to joke that he was the heart and I was the skeleton. Together, we made something that worked. After he died, his son Kevin took over. My nephew, 32 years old, marketing degree from a state school that barely makes the top 100 rankings. Spent exactly 6 months on actual job sites before deciding that construction work was beneath him and switching to the business side. I tried to give the kid a chance. Really, I did. He was Jack's son. My brother had asked me, literally on his deathbed during one of his last coherent moments, to look after Kevin, to teach him the business, to make sure the company stayed in the family. I promised. What I did not promise was to stand by while Kevin turned our legacy into an Instagram-friendly lifestyle brand. I found Vanessa first. She was standing in what used to be the conference room, directing 2 moving guys who were hauling out the old oak table where Jack and I had planned hundreds of projects. The table had a coffee ring stain on one corner that we never bothered to refinish because it reminded us of the all-nighter we pulled saving the Morrison Building project from a foundation disaster. That stain represented the moment we figured out how to underpin a failing foundation without evacuating the entire structure. It represented competence earned through crisis. Vanessa did not care about any of that. She was Kevin's fiancée. 28 years old. Her official title, I kid you not, was Director of Aesthetic Operations. She had a social media following in the low six figures, mostly people who wanted to see her post photos of herself in designer hard hats at construction sites, pretending to understand what was happening around her. She was everything wrong with my nephew's vision for the company, distilled into one person holding an overpriced latte and wearing clothes that cost more than most of our workers made in a week. I watched her gesture at the moving guys, never looking up from her phone. She was filming herself naturally, probably posting a story about the exciting rebranding journey or some similar garbage. Then I saw the dumpster outside. Through the window, I could see they had brought in one of those commercial waste containers. It was already half full of what Vanessa and Kevin clearly considered trash. Old filing cabinets, boxes of physical project files that represented decades of work, equipment that still functioned perfectly well but did not fit their new aesthetic. And there, right on top, I saw the photograph. I was outside before I consciously decided to move. The photo was in a simple black frame, glass cracked across one corner, black and white, slightly faded, from 1990. Jack and me, both young and lean and sunburned, shaking hands in front of our first major project, a 12-story office building downtown. We were general contractors on that job, not just subcontractors. It was the project that proved we could handle the big leagues. Jack was grinning in the photo. That huge, genuine smile he had that made everyone trust him instantly. I was more serious, but you could see the pride in both of us. We had done something real, something that would still be standing long after we were gone. The glass was cracked because someone had thrown it in the dumpster without care. I pulled it out, brushed off some coffee grounds that had splattered across the frame, and turned around to find Vanessa standing there. She barely glanced at me, still mostly focused on her phone screen. I asked her what this was doing in the trash. She looked up just long enough to see what I was holding, then went back to her phone. Her response was casual, dismissive, like she was explaining why she had thrown out expired milk. She called it depressing junk. Those were her exact words. Depressing junk, she explained, in that Valley Girl uptalk that made every sentence sound like a question, that the photo did not fit the vibe of their rebranding. They were going for a modern, minimalist aesthetic. Clean lines, abstract art, nothing that reminded clients of the old, dusty construction company we used to be. She said they were replacing all the old photos with abstract pieces from a local artist she knew, someone from her yoga studio who made paintings inspired by chakra energy or some similar nonsense. I stood there holding the photo of my dead brother and me, achieving something we had worked our entire lives to build, and listened to this 28-year-old explain why our history was bad for the brand. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I did not grab her phone and throw it in the dumpster, though the temptation was there. I just asked her where Kevin was. She waved vaguely toward the main office without looking up, already bored with the conversation, and went back to filming herself explaining the rebranding process to her followers. I walked back inside, carefully carrying the photo. The glass was cracked, but the image itself was undamaged. Jack's smile was still there, still genuine, still reminded me of a time when we built things because we were good at it, not because it looked impressive on social media. Kevin was in what used to be Jack's office. They had redecorated that too, of course. Jack's old wooden desk was gone, replaced with some modern glass monstrosity that probably cost $10,000 and would wobble if you leaned on it wrong. The walls were bare except for a single massive print of the new company logo, Miller Modern Design. They had dropped the connection to family, to legacy, to the fact that two brothers had built this company from literally nothing. Kevin looked good, I have to admit. He was wearing a slim-fit suit that probably cost $2,000, hair styled in that carefully messy way that takes more effort than just combing it, shoes shined to a mirror finish. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine article about disruptive entrepreneurs in legacy industries. He looked nothing like his father. Jack wore work boots to the office most days, even when meeting clients, because he believed people respected honesty over appearance. Jack drove the same Ford F-150 for 20 years because it still worked fine and replacing it felt wasteful. Jack knew the names of every single worker on every job site and asked about their families and actually listened to the answers. Kevin drove a Tesla and did not know the names of half the people on our payroll. When I walked in, he was on his phone, also filming content, also probably posting about the exciting transformation of the company. He saw me and smiled, that practiced smile he had developed, the one that looked warm but never reached his eyes. Then he saw the photo I was carrying, and the smile faltered slightly. He told me we needed to talk. I agreed. We did need to talk. He gestured for me to sit in one of the uncomfortable modern chairs they had installed. I stayed standing. The photo was still in my hands. Kevin launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. He had probably practiced it in the mirror, maybe even filmed himself delivering it to check his body language and tone. He talked about taking the company to the next level, about how construction was becoming a design-forward industry, about how my approach to the business was holding them back. He used words like synergy and optimization and digital transformation, words that sound impressive but mean nothing when you are trying to figure out why a foundation is settling unevenly or how to meet a deadline when the weather refuses to cooperate. He said, I represented the old analog world. He and Vanessa represented the digital future. He said my salary was too high for someone who was not contributing to their new vision. He said my constant focus on quality and safety standards was creating friction with their more flexible approach to project management. He said they needed to move in a different direction. He said I was being let go, effective immediately. He said all of this in that calm, practiced tone he had developed, the tone of someone who had watched TED Talks about how to fire people compassionately, the tone of someone who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing for the company, the tone of someone who had no idea what he had just done. I let him finish. I stood there, holding the photo of his father and me, and I let him explain why I was no longer needed at the company we had built from nothing. When he was done, I asked him one simple question. I asked if he understood what an RMO license was. He blinked, confused by the question, probably expecting me to get angry or argue about severance or threaten legal action. I explained it to him, speaking slowly and clearly, like I was teaching a child about something dangerous. The RMO license, Responsible Managing Officer. It is a license that allows a construction company to bid on and execute public works projects, schools, government buildings, hospitals, the projects that actually make real money, not the boutique residential renovations Vanessa posted about on Instagram. The license is tied to a specific person, not a company. That person has to have at least 5 years of experience, pass comprehensive exams, maintain continuing education, and have a spotless professional record. I am the RMO for Miller Brothers Construction. Was the RMO, I should say, since the company was now Miller Modern Design, and since I was apparently no longer employed there. I asked Kevin if he had another RMO lined up. I asked if he understood that without an RMO, the company could not legally operate on any of our current public works contracts. I asked if he had bothered to check what happens when an RMO leaves a company without a replacement. The confusion on his face was almost comical. Almost. He waved it off. Literally waved his hand in the air like he was brushing away a fly. He told me not to worry about the bureaucracy. His lawyers would handle the paperwork. It was just administrative stuff, not important. What mattered was the brand. What mattered was Vanessa's connections in the design world. What mattered was their vision for the future. He told me to pack my personal items and leave my keys on the desk. He said it with such confidence, such absolute certainty that he knew what he was doing. I could have explained further. I could have told him about the surety bonds, about the insurance requirements, about the fact that our largest current project, a major hospital expansion, had specific contract clauses about maintaining licensed personnel. I could have told him that his lawyers, no matter how expensive, could not fix what he had just broken. I could have told him a lot of things, but I did not. I just nodded. I turned around and walked to my old office, the one they had not gotten around to renovating yet, because it was not visible to clients. I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, a few books, my old hard hat from the first job site, my coffee mug that said World's Okayest Engineer, a gift from Jack on my 50th birthday, And the photo, the cracked, dusty photo they had thrown away like trash. I put everything in my old leather messenger bag, the one I had carried for 20 years, the one with stains from every job site crisis I had ever managed. I walked back through the office one last time. Vanessa was still filming content, explaining to her followers about the importance of aesthetic cohesion in modern business spaces. Kevin was back on his phone, probably already forgetting about the conversation we had just had. Neither of them looked at me as I walked past. The office smelled like lavender. Expensive, artificial wrong. I stopped at the door and took one last look around. At the sterile white walls. At the abstract art. At the glass desks and modern furniture. And all the expensive cosmetic changes they had made to cover up the fact that neither of them knew the first thing about actually building something. I thought about Jack. About how he would have hated all of this. About how he had built this company on handshakes and integrity, and the simple principle that if you do good work, people will hire you again. I thought about the promise I had made to him, to look after Kevin, to teach him the business. I thought about how some lessons cannot be taught gently. I carefully placed a photo in my bag, making sure it would not get damaged further. The glass was cracked, but the image was still there, still real, still proof that Jack and I had built something worth remembering. Then I thought about what Kevin had just set in motion, about the phone calls that would start happening in the next few hours, about the insurance companies and bonding agencies and contract administrators who would receive automatic notifications when an RMO status changed, about the house of cards Kevin had just knocked over without even realizing it existed. I walked out the door. The morning air was cool and clean, nothing like the artificial lavender smell inside. Traffic noise from the street. Construction sounds from a site 2 blocks away where someone was actually building something real. I thought about going home, about pouring a drink, about calling my lawyer just to make sure everything was documented properly. But mostly, I thought about Kevin's face when he told me not to worry about the paperwork, when he said his lawyers would handle it, when he dismissed 35 years of experience and expertise as old-fashioned thinking that was holding back his vision. He wanted a brand. He wanted a modern, design-forward company that looked impressive in promotional materials and social media posts. He was about to learn something every actual contractor understands from their first day on a job site. You can have the best brand in the world, the slickest marketing, the most beautiful office space, the most impressive logo. But if you do not have a foundation, none of it matters. And I had just taken away his foundation. I got in my truck. The same truck I had been driving for 12 years. It needed a new muffler, and the radio only worked on 2 stations, but it was paid off and it still ran fine, and it got me to and from every job site without complaint. Not flashy, not impressive, just functional, just like everything Jack and I had ever built. I put the messenger bag on the passenger seat, the cracked photo visible through the open top. Jack's smile looking up at me from 35 years ago, back when we were young and hungry and building our first skyscraper. I started the engine. In my head, I was already making the calls I needed to make, to the bonding company, to the insurance broker, to the state licensing board. All the boring paperwork that Kevin thought did not matter. All the bureaucratic details that were about to destroy everything he thought he had built. He wanted to rebrand. He wanted Miller Modern Design. Fine, let him have it. Let him have the expensive office and the abstract art and the lavender diffusers and the glass desks and the Tesla in the parking lot and the Instagram-ready aesthetic and all the impressive surface-level bullshit that looked so good in photographs. Let him have the brand. But he could not have what was mine. He could not have my license, my expertise, my 35 years of knowledge about how to actually build things that do not fall down. He could not have the foundation. I pulled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see the building. The office where Jack and I had spent 35 years building something real. The office where Kevin and Vanessa were probably already back to filming content, already celebrating their bold new direction, already planning their next Instagram post about modern business practices. They had no idea. None at all. The paperwork bomb was already ticking. They just could not hear it yet. But they would. Oh, they would. I drove away, the cracked photo on the seat beside me, and I did not look back again. The house was quiet when I got home. Too quiet, maybe. The kind of silence that makes you notice every small sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old clock Jack gave me when I bought this place 30 years ago. The creak of the floorboards under my boots. I like quiet. Always have. After a day on a job site with concrete mixers roaring and workers shouting and the constant percussion of hammers and drills, coming home to silence feels like dropping into cool water after hours in the sun. But this was different. This quiet had weight to it. I set my messenger bag on the kitchen table. The leather was worn smooth in places, cracked in others, stained with coffee and concrete dust and the general accumulation of 3 decades spent managing construction projects. Some people treat their work bags like accessories. Mine was a tool, beaten up and still functional. Just like me, I suppose. I pulled out the photo first. The frame was cheap black metal, nothing fancy. Jack and I had never been fancy people. The glass was cracked diagonally across one corner, spiderwebbing out from the impact point where it had hit something in that dumpster. Coffee grounds had left a brown stain along the bottom edge of the frame. But the photo itself was fine. Black and white, slightly faded, from 1990. 35 years ago, though it feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. Jack and me, both in our late 20s, standing in front of our first major project. A 12-story office building that still stands downtown. We were general contractors on that job, not just subs. Our first time running the entire show. Our first time proving we belonged in the big leagues. Jack was grinning like he had just won the lottery. I was trying to look professional, serious, but you could see the pride underneath. We had done something real. Something that would outlast us. I set the photo on the kitchen table, propping it against a salt shaker so it stood upright. Then I pulled out my RMO certificate. I had taken it off the wall in my office before I left. It was in a simple frame, glass still intact. The official document from the state licensing board, certifying that I was qualified to serve as a responsible managing officer for a construction company. Most people do not know what an RMO is. Hell, most people in construction do not fully understand the implications. But anyone who works on public projects, government contracts, schools, hospitals, knows exactly how important it is. It is the license that makes everything legal. The certification that says, yes, this company has someone qualified to ensure projects meet all codes, standards, and safety requirements. Without it, you cannot bid on public works, cannot execute government contracts, cannot touch any project that involves taxpayer money. And in construction, that is where the real money lives. I set the certificate next to the photo. 2 documents. 2 pieces of paper that represented everything Kevin had just thrown away. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. Nothing fancy. Just bourbon from a bottle I had been working on for 6 months. The good stuff that you sip slowly, not the cheap rot gut you drink to forget. I was not drinking to forget. I was drinking to think. The kitchen window looked out onto my backyard. 1/4 acre, mostly lawn, with a small workshop in the back where I built furniture when I needed to work with my hands on something smaller than a skyscraper. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Beautiful evening. Perfect temperature. The kind of night Jack would have called me to suggest we grab dinner somewhere. Maybe that diner we liked that served breakfast 24 hours a day. But Jack was gone. Had been for 14 months. And his son had just fired me from the company we built together. I took a sip of the whiskey. Smooth burn. Oak and caramel, and just enough bite to remind you it was there. The thing about construction is that everything comes down to details. Most people see a building and think about the architect, the design, the pretty exterior and the impressive lobby, and all the cosmetic stuff that photographs well. But buildings do not stand up because of good design. They stand up because someone did the math correctly. Because someone specified the right grade of concrete and the proper rebar spacing and the correct foundation depth for the soil conditions. Because someone checked and double-checked and triple-checked every critical measurement. Buildings stand up because of paperwork. boring, tedious, unglamorous paperwork that most people never think about. Kevin thought paperwork was just bureaucracy, administrative nonsense that got in the way of his vision. He actually said that to me, called it old-fashioned thinking. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jim Hendricks. Jim had been our insurance and bonding broker for 23 years. He was the guy who made sure we had all the proper coverage, all the required bonds, all the legal protection we needed to operate. He was meticulous, detail-oriented, exactly the kind of person you want handling something as important as contractor's insurance. He was also a personal friend, had been at Jack's funeral, had sent a card and a bottle of very good scotch after, had checked in on me a few times to make sure I was holding up okay. Jim would understand what I was about to do. Might not like it, but he would understand. I hit the call button. He answered on the third ring, sounding tired but friendly. Asked how I was doing. Asked if I needed anything. I told him I was fine, but I had some business to take care of. I explained the situation slowly and clearly, that I had been terminated from Miller Modern Design earlier that day, that I was no longer employed by the company, that I was officially notifying him of the change in my employment status. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Jim asked me if I was sure, if I had really been fired, or if this was just some misunderstanding that could be worked out. I told him I was absolutely sure. Kevin had made it very clear. I was no longer wanted, no longer needed. My services were no longer required. Another pause, longer this time. Jim asked me if I understood what this meant for the company. I told him I understood perfectly. That was why I was calling. He started explaining it anyway, not because he thought I did not know, but because he needed to make sure I understood the full scope of what I was asking him to do. The surety bonds, the performance bonds that guaranteed we would complete projects according to contract terms, the payment bonds that guaranteed we would pay our subcontractors and suppliers. Every public works project required them. They were not optional. They were legal requirements. And those bonds were tied directly to having a licensed RMO. Specifically, they were tied to me. When an RMO leaves a company, the bonding company has to be notified immediately. Not next week, not when it is convenient. Immediately. And when that notification happens, the bonds become invalid, automatically. No grace period. No chance to fix it later. Which means any active contracts that require those bonds become void. The company is no longer legally authorized to continue work. Everything stops. Everything. Jim told me that Miller Modern had 3 active public works projects right now. I knew. I had been managing all 3. The hospital expansion, $7 million contract. Foundation work already started. Concrete delivery scheduled for tomorrow morning. The elementary school renovation, $3 million contract. Structural work in progress. Safety inspection scheduled for next week. The county courthouse restoration, for $1 million contract. Historical preservation work with strict oversight requirements. $14 million in active contracts, all requiring valid surety bonds, all requiring a licensed RMO, all about to become invalid in approximately 12 hours. Jim asked me one more time if I was absolutely certain I wanted him to process the notification. I told him I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I could hear him typing on his computer, the clicking of keys, the slight pause as he pulled up the right forms and screens. He told me that once he submitted this, it was done. No takebacks. The system would automatically notify all relevant parties, the bonding company, the insurance carriers, the state licensing board, the contract administrators for each project, by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Every single entity involved with those projects would know that Miller Modern Design no longer had valid bonding, no longer met the legal requirements to operate. The contracts would be terminated automatically. The company would be barred from bidding on any new public works. The financial penalties would be severe. Kevin's lawyers, no matter how expensive, could not stop it, could not delay it, could not fix it, because this was not about interpretation or negotiation. This was about black and white legal requirements. You either had a licensed RMO and valid bonds, or you did not. And tomorrow morning, they would not. Jim asked me what Kevin had done to deserve this. I thought about the answer for a moment, took another sip of whiskey, while I considered how to explain it. I told Jim about the office, about the lavender diffusers and the sterile white walls and the abstract art, about Vanessa calling our history depressing junk, about the photo in the dumpster, about Kevin explaining that I was old-fashioned, that my focus on quality and safety was holding them back, that they needed to move in a different direction. I told him about Kevin dismissing the importance of the RMO license, calling it just bureaucracy, saying his lawyers would handle it. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Jim told me he would process the notification immediately, that he would mark it as effective the moment he submitted it, that the system would do the rest. He told me he was sorry it had come to this, that Jack would have hated seeing the company end this way. I told him Jack would have hated what had become even more. We said goodbye. Professional, cordial, the kind of goodbye you exchange when you both know you just detonated a bomb and there is no defusing it. I set the phone down on the table next to the photo and the certificate. The whiskey was half gone. The sun had finished setting. The kitchen was getting dark, lit only by the small light over the stove. I sat there in the dimness and thought about tomorrow, about Kevin arriving at the office, probably late because he was not a morning person, about him checking his email and seeing the notifications, about the moment when he realized what had happened, about Vanessa filming herself explaining their exciting new project direction, suddenly having to explain why work had stopped, why armed security guards were preventing anyone from entering the site, why their clients were calling lawyers, about $14 million in contracts evaporating overnight, about the reputation damage, the financial penalties, the impossibility of getting new bonds without a licensed RMO, the fact that finding and hiring a qualified RMO would take weeks at minimum, and no competent RMO would want to join a company that was radioactive in the industry. I did not feel happy about it. I did not feel victorious or triumphant or any of the emotions you might expect. Mostly I felt tired, sad, like something important had died, which it had. The company Jack and I built was dead. Kevin had killed at the moment he decided that aesthetics mattered more than competence. That brand mattered more than ability. That looking good was more important than being good. I had just made sure everyone else knew it was dead too. There's a certain kind of satisfaction in that. Not joy, not celebration. Just a grim recognition that justice, however harsh, was being served. They wanted modern. They wanted digital. They wanted to be rid of the old analog world I represented. Fine, they got their wish. But the modern digital world still runs on the same old rules, still requires licenses and permits and insurance and bonds and all the boring paperwork they dismissed as irrelevant. I thought about the hospital project, specifically the one with the concrete pour scheduled for tomorrow morning. It was a complex foundation. Hospital foundations always are. You have to account for the weight of heavy equipment on upper floors, have to ensure vibration dampening for sensitive machinery, have to plan for potential future expansion. I had spent 3 weeks reviewing the engineering specs for that pour, had flagged 6 potential issues, and worked with the structural engineer to revise the plans, had personally inspected the formwork and rebar placement twice. The concrete trucks would show up tomorrow at 7 in the morning. 10 trucks, each carrying 9 cubic yards of specialty high-strength concrete, 90 cubic yards total. Roughly 200,000 pounds of material that had to be placed, consolidated, and finished within a specific time window before it started setting. And they would show up to a job site that was legally shut down, with no one authorized to accept delivery, with security guards blocking the entrance, with a bright red stop work order posted on the gates. That concrete would have to go somewhere, probably dumped at a disposal site. Total loss of about $15,000, not counting the mobilization costs and schedule delays. And that was just the beginning, just the first small symptom of the much larger problem. Without valid bonds, they could not continue any work, could not bring in replacement contractors. Could not do anything except watch the schedule slip and the penalties accumulate. Kevin was going to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between looking competent and actually being competent. I finished my whiskey, set the empty glass down next to the photo. Jack's face looked up at me from 35 years ago. That huge grin, that absolute confidence that we could handle anything as long as we stuck together. I wished he was here, not to see what I had just done, but to help me figure out if I had done the right thing. But I knew what he would say. Jack had no patience for incompetence, no tolerance for people who valued appearance over substance. He fired people who cut corners, who lied on their time cards, who compromised safety for speed. He would have been furious about the photo in the dumpster, about the disrespect to our legacy, about Kevin's casual dismissal of everything we had built. Jack would have understood, might have done the same thing himself. Or maybe he would have found a gentler way, a way to teach Kevin a lesson without burning down the company. But Jack was not here, and I had made my choice. In 14 hours, Kevin would learn that construction is not about Instagram posts and abstract art and expensive office furniture. It is about competence, about knowledge, about the unglamorous details that keep buildings standing and keep people safe. It is about the foundation. And I had just removed his foundation completely. I stood up and took the empty glass to the sink, washed it carefully, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Then I picked up the photo and the certificate and carried them to my bedroom. I hung the certificate back up on the wall. It looked good there. Official. Earned. Proof that I knew what I was doing. The photo I set on my nightstand, propped against a lamp. Jack's grin was the last thing I would see before I turned out the light. The first thing I would see in the morning. I changed into my usual sleeping clothes. Old t-shirt and sweatpants. Nothing fancy. I brushed my teeth. Went through my normal nighttime routine. Everything ordinary. Everything normal. Like I had not just destroyed my nephew's company. Like I had not just made sure $14 million in contracts would evaporate overnight. Like I had not just guaranteed that the family business would cease to exist. I climbed into bed. The sheets were cool and clean. The pillow was exactly the right firmness. The room was dark and quiet. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere in the neighborhood, the normal sounds of suburban evening. Tomorrow morning, Kevin's world would explode. His phone would start ringing with calls from contract administrators and city officials and clients demanding explanations. His email would fill with notifications of contract cancellations and penalty assessments. His lawyers would tell him there was nothing they could do. Vanessa would probably leave him within a week. People like her do not stick around when the money disappears. The company would fold. The assets would be liquidated. The name Miller Modern Design would become a cautionary tale in the local construction industry about what happens when you value style over substance. All of that would happen tomorrow. All of that chaos and destruction and professional ruin. But tonight, lying in my bed in the quiet darkness, I felt perfectly calm, peaceful even, like I had done exactly what needed to be done, like justice, harsh as it was, had been properly served, like the scales had been balanced. Kevin had wanted to be free of the old analog world, free of my constant focus on quality and safety, free of the burden of competence and expertise and all those boring details that held back his vision. I had given him exactly what he wanted. Freedom from me, freedom from my experience, freedom from my knowledge. And tomorrow, he would discover exactly what that freedom cost. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, let it out slowly. The house was quiet. Perfectly, absolutely quiet. Tomorrow would be loud, chaotic, destructive. But tonight, there was only silence. I thought about Jack one more time before I drifted off. About how he used to say that construction taught you patience, that you could not rush a foundation, could not take shortcuts on the critical stuff, that if you built it right, it would last, and if you built it wrong, it would fall. Kevin had built his vision on sand, on aesthetics and connections and brand identity, on everything that looked impressive but had no actual strength. Tomorrow, the tide would come in, and Kevin would learn what happens to structures built on sand. But that was tomorrow's problem, tomorrow's lesson, tomorrow's reckoning. Tonight, I slept like a baby. Deep, dreamless, peaceful, the sleep of someone who knows they did the right thing, however difficult it was. The sleep of someone who understands that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. The sleep of someone who has made their peace with what comes next. Outside, the night was calm. Stars visible through my bedroom window. Cool breeze moving through the trees. Inside, silence. Darkness. Rest. The paperwork bomb was armed. The countdown had started. The notification had been sent. By morning, everything would change. But right now, in this moment, there was only quiet. I pulled the blanket up, adjusted the pillow, settled into that comfortable position you find after years of sleeping in the same bed. Tomorrow, Kevin would learn about consequences, about competence, about the difference between looking professional and actually being professional. Tomorrow, the storm would hit. But tonight, there was only peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you have done exactly what needed to be done. No more, no less. The kind of peace that comes from understanding that some lessons cannot be taught gently, that some mistakes have to be felt fully to be understood. The kind of peace that comes from letting go of something you built, knowing that it was already gone before you released it. I turned off the bedside lamp. The room went dark, except for the faint glow of moonlight through the window. Jack's photo was invisible now, just a shape in the darkness. But I knew it was there. Knew he was grinning at me from 35 years ago. Knew he understood. I closed my eyes for the last time that night. And slept. I found out later what happened that morning at the hospital site. I was not there to see it personally. But in construction, word travels fast. Especially when something spectacular goes wrong. By lunchtime, I had gotten 3 phone calls from people who either witnessed it firsthand or heard about it from someone who did. The story was too good not to share. Too perfect. Too much like watching karma arrive in a concrete mixer. Let me paint you the picture they painted for me. 7 in the morning, the hospital expansion site. Kevin and Vanessa arrived early, which was unusual for them, but made sense given what they had planned. Vanessa was filming content. Of course she was. She had told her Instagram followers that today was a major milestone for Miller Modern Design, the foundation pour for a state-of-the-art medical facility. A $7 million project that would cement their reputation, pun absolutely intended, as serious players in construction world. She was wearing a pink hard hat, custom ordered, matched her outfit, also matched her phone case and the logo she had designed for Miller Modern Design. The pink hard hat was not OSHA compliant. Wrong material. Decorative, not protective. But it looked great on camera, which was apparently all that mattered. She stood near the excavated foundation pit, phone held at that perfect selfie angle, talking to her followers about the exciting new era of construction, about bringing aesthetic vision to an industry that had been dominated by boring old men in dirty clothes for too long. Behind her, lined up on the access road, were 10 concrete mixer trucks, gleaming white drums slowly rotating, each one carrying 9 cubic yards of high-strength concrete, 90 cubic yards total. About $400,000 worth of material and labor when you factor in the specialty mix design, the delivery coordination, the pump truck rental, everything. Kevin stood next to her, looking proud, wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000, hair perfectly styled, shoes that had never seen a day of actual work, playing the part of a successful young entrepreneur overseeing his empire. The morning was perfect for a concrete pour. Mild temperature, no rain forecast, light breeze, everything aligned exactly right, which made it even funnier when everything went catastrophically wrong. According to the foreman who called me, the first sign of trouble was the sound of multiple vehicles approaching fast. Official vehicles, the kind with lights on top. 3 cars from the city building department, 2 from the state contractor's licensing board, 1 police cruiser for backup, just in case things got complicated. They pulled up to the site entrance like they were raiding a drug operation. Doors opening. Officials stepping out with clipboards and badges, And that particular expression bureaucrats get when they are about to ruin someone's day, and they are absolutely justified in doing so. The lead inspector was a guy named Martinez. I had worked with him on a dozen projects over the years. Tough but fair. Knew the code inside and out. Not someone you could charm or intimidate or sweet-talk your way around. He walked straight past Vanessa, who was still filming, still talking her phone about the transformative power of design, thinking, and construction. He walked up to Kevin and asked if he was the person in charge. Kevin turned on that smile. That practiced, confident, I am a successful businessman smile. Told Martinez that yes, he was the owner of Miller Modern Design, and they were just about to begin a very important concrete pour. So if this could wait until later, that would be fantastic. Martinez did not smile back. He informed Kevin that the site was being shut down immediately, that all work must cease, that all workers must evacuate, that failure to comply would result in criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Kevin's smile faltered. He asked what this was about. Some kind of mistake? Some paperwork mix-up that could be sorted out with a quick phone call? Martinez pulled out a document. Official letter from the bonding company. Notification that Miller Modern Design surety bonds had been revoked as of 8 o'clock that morning due to loss of the license RMO. That all active public works contracts were therefore void. That the company was not authorized to continue any work on any government project. Kevin went pale. Actually pale. Like the blood just drained straight out his face. He started to argue. Started to explain that this was just a misunderstanding. That his uncle had left voluntarily. That they had lawyers handling the transition. That surely there was some grace period, some way to sort this out without stopping active work. Martinez cut him off. Told him there was no grace period. No flexibility. No negotiation. The law was clear. No valid RMO meant no valid bonds. No valid bonds meant no authorization to work. No authorization meant immediate shutdown. Then Martinez did something that, according to everyone who saw it, was absolutely beautiful in its bureaucratic brutality. He pulled out a bright red sticker, about 8 inches by 10 inches. Official stop work order from the city building department. He walked over to the chain link gate at the site entrance, and he slapped that sticker right in the center, smoothing it down carefully, making sure it adhered properly. The sticker was impossible to miss. Bright red, bold black letters. Stop work order. Unauthorized entry prohibited. Violators subject to criminal prosecution. It might as well have been Kevin's obituary, because that sticker just killed his company, and he was only beginning to realize it. Vanessa was still filming, still had her phone up, but now she was pivoting, trying to figure out how to spin this for her followers. Try and make it look like some minor administrative hiccup that would be resolved shortly. The look on her face when Martinez told her to stop filming or he would have the police confiscate her phone as evidence of continuing unauthorized work was, I am told, absolutely priceless. But the best part, the part that everyone who told me this story emphasized, was what happened with the concrete trucks. 10 mixer trucks, lined up, engines running, drums rotating, each one containing thousands of pounds of concrete that was on a very specific timer. See, concrete does not wait. Once the chemical reaction starts, once the water hits the cement, you have a window. Depending on the mix design, the temperature, the additives, you might have 90 minutes. Maybe 2 hours if you're lucky and conditions are perfect. After that, it starts to set, starts to harden. And once that process begins, there is no stopping it, no reversing it. The concrete will cure inside the drum, ruining the truck, requiring the entire mixer be replaced. A new concrete mixer truck costs about $200,000. The driver of the first truck in line had been watching this whole scene unfold, watching the officials arrive, watching the argument, watching the stop work order go up, and he was doing math in his head. Math about how long his concrete had been mixed. Math about how much time he had left. Math about who was going to pay for a new truck if the stuff set up inside his drum. He climbed down from his cab. Big guy, probably 50 years old, wearing a high-vis vest covered in concrete dust and stains. Work boots that had seen actual work. The kind of guy who had been driving mixer trucks for 30 years and had exactly zero patience for nonsense. He walked up to Kevin, who was still trying to argue with Martinez about temporary permits or emergency authorizations or some other fantasy solution. The driver asked Kevin where he should dump his load. Kevin, distracted, told him to wait. Just wait. They would figure this out. The driver explained very clearly and very loudly that waiting was not an option, that he had 9 cubic yards of 4,000 psi concrete in his drum, that it had been mixed at the batch plant 40 minutes ago, that he had maybe 20 more minutes before it started to set, that if it set inside his drum, Kevin would be buying him a new truck for $200,000. Kevin tried to wave him off, told him to just hold on. Everything would be sorted out shortly. The driver's face got red. His voice got louder. He explained that Kevin clearly did not understand how concrete worked, that the chemical reaction happening in his drum right now did not care about permits or licenses or administrative problems. That chemistry did not negotiate. That Kevin had exactly 15 minutes to tell him where to dump this concrete, or it was going on the ground right here. And Kevin would also be paying an environmental fine for illegal disposal of concrete waste, which would be another $50,000 on top of the cost of the new truck. That was when it really hit Kevin. You could see it, people told me, the exact moment when he realized he was not just facing an administrative delay. He was facing a financial catastrophe that was unfolding in real time, minute by minute, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. Because even if he could somehow convince Martinez to let them pour, which he could not, the concrete was already contaminated by the shutdown. Insurance would not cover it. The city would not accept it. It was a total loss no matter what. But if he did nothing, if he just stood there, 10 trucks worth of concrete would have to be dumped. $250,000 in material alone, plus the cost of rescheduling, plus the penalties for missing the timeline, plus the potential damage to the trucks if any of it started setting. And that was just the immediate crisis. That was just today's disaster. The larger problem. The contracts being voided, the bonding issues, the reputation damage, all of that was still waiting to crush him. Kevin started making phone calls, frantic phone calls, to his lawyers, to other contractors, to anyone he thought might be able to help. Nobody could help. Nobody wanted to help. Because everyone in the local construction industry already knew what had happened, already knew that Miller Modern had lost its bonding, already knew that Kevin had fired his licensed RMO, and now the whole company was radioactive. Vanessa had stopped filming. She was no longer trying to document this for her followers. She was just standing there, watching her boyfriend's company implode in real time, and slowly realizing that her comfortable lifestyle was imploding right along with it. She asked Kevin what they should do. Her voice, according to witnesses, had lost all of its usual confidence. She sounded scared, lost, like she was finally understanding that aesthetic vision, and social media followers could not fix this. Kevin did not answer her. He was staring at the line of concrete trucks, at the stop work order on the gate, at Martinez and the other officials who were now directing the workers to evacuate. The foreman told me that Kevin just stood there for what felt like forever, just frozen, paralyzed by the scope of the disaster. Then Kevin pulled out his phone, hands shaking, scrolled through his contacts, and called me. I was at the cemetery when the phone rang. I go there sometimes, to Jack's grave, to sit on the bench nearby and just think, to update him on things, even though I know he is not really hearing it. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone, even if they are not there anymore. It was a nice morning, quiet, peaceful, the kind of morning that makes you think about life and death and legacy, and what actually matters when everything else is stripped away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw Kevin's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered, taking my time. No rush. When I finally picked up, Kevin was already talking, yelling actually. His voice was high-pitched, panicked. The kind of panic you hear when someone's whole world is collapsing and they are desperately grabbing for anything that might stop the fall. He told me I had sabotaged him, betrayed him, stabbed him in the back, that I had deliberately destroyed the company out of spite, that I had ruined everything. I let him yell, let him get it out, let him vent all that fear and anger and desperation into the phone, while I sat there on the bench next to Jack's grave and looked at the headstone. When he finally ran out of steam, when his voice started to crack and the anger started turning into something closer to begging, I spoke. I told him very calmly that I had not sabotaged anything, that I had simply removed myself from his company, as he had requested, that he was the one who fired me, that he was the one who said I was holding him back, that he was the one who dismissed the importance of licensing and bonding as mere bureaucracy. I told him I had just taken him at his word. Kevin started begging, actually begging, pleading with me to come back, promising anything, more money, equity in the company, total control over all technical decisions, whatever I wanted, whatever it would take. He told me they were losing everything, that the concrete alone was going to cost $250,000, that the contracts were being canceled, that clients were threatening lawsuits, that the bonding company would not even talk to them about getting new bonds without a licensed RMO. He told me I was the only one who could fix this, the only one who could save the company. I let him finish. Let him lay out the full scope of the disaster. Let him explain exactly how thoroughly his world was falling apart. Then I told him the truth. I told him I could not come back even if I wanted to, that he could not afford to hire me, that he was bankrupt. He just had not admitted it to himself yet. I explained, in the same calm tone I used to explain technical problems to clients, that the damage was already done, that the contracts were already void, that the penalties were already accruing, that his reputation in the industry was already destroyed. I told him that even if he somehow found another RMO willing to join Miller Modern, which he would not because no competent professional would touch this disaster with a 10-foot pole, it would take weeks to get new bonds approved. And by then, all the contracts would have been reassigned to other contractors. All the clients would have found alternatives. All the money would be gone. I told him that he had wanted to prove he could run the company without me, without the old analog world, without boring details like licenses and permits and proper insurance. I told him that now he had his chance to prove it. There was silence on the other end of the line. Long silence. The kind of silence that means someone is finally, truly understanding the consequences of their choices. Then Kevin said something that almost made me feel bad for him. Almost. He asked me why I had done this, why I had destroyed the company his father built. I looked at Jack's headstone, at the dates carved into the granite, at the inscription that said beloved brother, devoted father, master builder. I told Kevin that I had not destroyed the company Jack built. That Kevin had destroyed at the moment he threw our history in a dumpster and called it depressing junk. The moment he decided that aesthetics mattered more than competence. The moment he valued Instagram likes over structural integrity. I told him that the company Jack and I built was already dead. I had just made sure everyone else knew it. Then I hung up. I sat there for a while longer, listening to the birds, watching the clouds move across the sky, thinking about the promise I had made to Jack, to look after Kevin, to teach him the business. I wondered if this counted as keeping that promise. If destroying someone's life could somehow be the lesson they needed to learn. I did not have a good answer for that. Still dawned not. But I knew Jack would have understood. He had no patience for incompetence masquerading as innovation. No tolerance for people who valued appearance over substance. He would have been furious about the dumpster, about the pink hard hat, about everything Vanessa represented. Maybe not furious enough to do what I did, but furious enough to understand why I did it. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, told Jack I would be back next week. Same as always. Then I went home and waited to see what would happen next. What happened next was predictable, depressingly predictable. Miller Modern Design filed for bankruptcy within 2 weeks. The assets were liquidated. The office space was abandoned. The name disappeared from the local business registry. Vanessa left Kevin 3 days after the concrete disaster. Apparently, she suddenly remembered that she had always wanted to explore opportunities in New York or Los Angeles, somewhere with better networking prospects and fewer construction sites. Her Instagram never mentioned Kevin or Miller Modern again, just moved on to the next thing, the next aesthetic, the next carefully curated vision of success. Kevin lost everything: the company, the office, the Tesla, the expensive suits, the whole carefully constructed image of young entrepreneurial success. The hospital project got reassigned to a competitor, a good company, professional, competent. They asked me to consult on the foundation pour, given that I had done all the preliminary work. I said yes, got paid consultant rates, which were considerably higher than my old salary had been. They asked if I wanted a permanent position. I told them I would think about it. I did not hear from Kevin for 6 months. Did not know where he was or what he was doing. Honestly, did not think about him much. I was busy with consulting work, busy with my furniture projects in the workshop, busy living a quieter life than I had in years. Then one day I was driving past a commercial site downtown. Mixed-use development, apartments over retail. Nothing fancy, but solid work. Good contractor on the project. The kind of builder who does things right. I glanced over at the site as I drove past, the way you do when you have spent 40 years in construction and cannot help but evaluate every project you see. And I saw Kevin. He was on the ground level, in the concrete crew, wearing actual work clothes, not a designer suit, carrying rebar, covered in dust and sweat, actually working, actually building something with his hands. I almost drove past, almost kept going, but something made me pull over, park the truck, watch for a minute. Kevin was carrying a bundle of number 5 rebar, 40 feet long, weighs about 60 pounds. Awkward to carry, especially if you're not used to it. He was struggling with it, but he was getting it done, moving it from the storage pile to where the ironworkers needed it. He set it down, straightened up, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of rust-colored dust across his face. That is when he saw me, saw my truck parked at the curb, saw me watching him. For a second, I thought he might look away, might pretend he had not seen me, might try to avoid the confrontation or the embarrassment or whatever he was feeling. But he did not. He walked over to the fence, pulled off his work gloves, held them in one hand while he approached. His hands were different, completely different. 6 months ago, they had been smooth, manicured, the hands of someone who pointed at things while other people did the actual work. Now they were rough, calloused, stained with concrete dust and rust, and dirt that does not come off with regular soap. The kind of hands you get from actual labor, from gripping tools and moving materials and doing the unglamorous work that makes buildings happen. They looked like my hands had looked when I was his age, when Jack and I were just starting out, when we were the ones carrying rebar and mixing concrete and learning the business from the ground up. Kevin stood there on the other side of the fence, looking at me, not angry, not resentful, just tired, and maybe a little bit wiser than he had been 6 months ago. I nodded at him, just a simple nod, acknowledgement, recognition. He nodded back, same simple gesture, no words, no apologies, no explanations, just two guys in the construction business acknowledging each other's existence. I got back in my truck, started the engine, prepared to drive away. But before I did, I looked at him one more time, really looked at him, saw the difference 6 months had made. The expensive suit was gone. The Tesla was gone. The girlfriend was gone. The company was gone. The image was gone. But something else was there now, something that had not been there before. Competence, or at least the beginning of it. The understanding that buildings get built by people who know how to actually build them, that you cannot fake expertise, cannot Instagram your way to structural integrity, cannot brand yourself into competence. You have to earn it, the hard way, the slow way, with calluses and sweat and thousands of hours of unglamorous work that nobody photographs for social media. Jack had asked me to teach Kevin the business, to turn his boy into a man who could carry on the legacy we had built. I had done that, just not the way Jack had imagined, not the way I had intended. But looking at Kevin standing there with his rough hands and his dirty work clothes and his tired eyes, I realized that the lesson had been learned. Expensive lesson, painful lesson, catastrophically destructive lesson, but learned nonetheless. You cannot build anything real on aesthetics alone, on brand identity and Instagram followers and expensive office furniture. You need foundation. You need competence. You need the kind of deep knowledge that comes from years of actually doing the work. You need calluses. Kevin had them now. Would probably have more in another 6 months. Would probably spend years learning what Jack and I had known instinctively. Would probably never own another company. Never have another chance to put his name on a building. But he would know how to build. Would understand what it takes to make a structure that stands. Would respect the craft and the people who practice it. I drove away. Left him there. Back to his rebar and his concrete dust and his education in reality. The sun was setting. The sky was doing that thing it does in the late afternoon, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. The kind of light that makes even a construction site look beautiful. The kind of light that makes you think about time passing and seasons changing and how nothing stays the same forever. I thought about Jack, about how he would have reacted to seeing his son like this, broke, humbled, working a labor job for probably $15 an hour. Part of me thought Jack would have been heartbroken, would have been furious at me for destroying Kevin's life so thoroughly. But another part of me, the part that knew Jack best, thought he might have understood, might have even been proud in a complicated way. Because Kevin was finally learning, finally becoming the kind of man who could build something real instead of just pretending to. The method had been harsh, more destructive than necessary, more expensive than it should have been. $5 million in destroyed contracts, a company liquidated, a young man's life blown apart. But sometimes the expensive lessons are the only ones that stick. Sometimes you have to lose everything before you can build something real. I got home just as it was getting dark, parked the truck, walked inside, made myself dinner. Simple stuff, nothing fancy. While I ate, I looked at the photo on my shelf. Jack and me, 35 years ago, in front of that first skyscraper. Both of us grinning like idiots. Both of us so proud of what we had built. The glass was still cracked. I had never gotten it fixed. Kept it that way as a reminder of what we had built, of what had been lost, of what Kevin had learned. I raised my glass of water in a silent toast to the photo, to Jack, to the company we built, to the nephew we had both tried to save in our own ways. Then I finished my dinner and went to bed, because tomorrow there would be more work, more projects, more buildings to build and problems to solve and lessons to teach. The construction never stops. The work continues. People keep building, keep creating, keep trying to make things that last. And somewhere out there, Kevin was learning how to be part of that, learning the hard way, learning through failure and humiliation, and the kind of education you cannot get in a business school, learning to build with his hands instead of just his image, learning that the foundation matters more than the facade, learning what his father had tried to teach him, what I had tried to teach him, what the whole industry had tried to teach him, just learning it the expensive way, but learning it nonetheless. And maybe in another decade or two, he would be ready to build something real, something that lasted, something that honored the legacy Jack and I had created, even if it looked nothing like what we had imagined. Maybe, or maybe not. Either way, the lesson was over. The price had been paid. The education was complete. My job was done. I turned off the light and went to sleep, peacefully, like I had every night since this whole thing started, because I had done what needed to be done, had taught what needed to be taught, had honored Jack's request in the only way that would actually work. I had made a man out of his boy. Just cost $5 million to do it. But some foundations are expensive, and important ones are always worth the price.